Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards and today's session topic is passing and moving. But before we get into today's session, make sure to give us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's session, click the link above. For today's session, we'll be starting off with a warm-up drill before moving on to the main part of the session, which will be split into 3 parts, each followed by an animation video. So moving into the setup and the equipment needed for today's session, the session is designed for between 8 and 16 players. When I done the session myself, I had 8 players available. The teams are split into four groups, so we had 4 groups of 2. So in terms of equipment for that, you need 4 sets of bibs, or you can have 3 sets of bibs and 1 non-bib team, a bag of balls and cones. If you can get yourself flat markers, they're a lot better to split the pitch off into halves, so that if the ball hits the marker, it doesn't make the ball travel anywhere different, whereas if it hits a cone, it can hit the cone and affect somebody's touch. So moving into the first part of the session, the warm-up drill. Each group is split into 2s. If you have more players, you can put them into groups of 3s to work on opening out and playing out. But when I had 8 players, we went into 4 groups of 2. 1 player in the middle of the box, which is 5 by 5. So it's nice and tight, so the movements are quick and sharp. 1 player on the outside, and the players are swapping every minute. So they're working high intensity for 1 minute. After 30 seconds, they will start to get tired. So it does test their awareness, their decision making. Are they doing the same things that they were doing at the start when they're starting getting tired, or do they get lazy and just start playing the ball back straight away? So the focus on the session is working on receiving skills, playing the ball quickly, lots of quick movements, so then when we move into the main part of the session, they will start to do these things more often. So the player on the outside will start with the ball. For the first part, he will play in, and then the player in the middle will play back, and then run round any of the cones on the side. So he's played the ball to his teammate, and then he's found a new space, come back, and then got the ball again. After they've swapped over, it will then be, there's 4 different coloured cones, so red, yellow, blue and orange, for instance. The player on the outside will play the ball in. If he says a colour, the player must then turn out, dribble to that colour, dribble back in and then play the ball. If the player on the outside doesn't say a colour, we want them to say man on. So then if they say man on, we want them to check the shoulder, play the ball back, find a new space in the middle and then receive the ball again. So it's always making the players think of the space around them. Is it a defender coming up to them? So then if a player tells them to turn out to a green cone, which might be on the end, we want them to receive on the back foot, to turn out quickly, drive to that cone, get back in and pass the ball. Or if he tells them to dribble forward, they might have a man on the back and they're dribbling away into space. The second part of the warm-up drill is testing ball control as well. So instead of playing to feet, the player on the outside will have the ball in their hand, and they will either throw it to the chest, to the knee or to the feet, and it'll be the same thing again. For the first part, they will throw it into the player, they'll control it with whatever body part that the player said, they'll dribble out to any cone and play it back, and then after they've both had a go after that for a minute, it'll be the player on the outside will throw the ball, tell them what colour to go to, obviously throwing it to the chest, to the knee, to the foot, but when they're throwing it the second time, they won't tell them where the ball's going to come to, so they've got to react a bit quicker themselves, turn out and go, or if they say man on, it's controlling the ball with a man behind you, so get your arm out and protect the ball and then play back. We will now switch to an animation video before moving on to the main part of the session. Moving into the main part of this week's session. So we've now got a bigger area, it's 20 by 20, so it's still quite tight because we want lots of movement and the intensity to be high throughout. If you've got more players than 8, so if you've got 12 or 15 players, you don't have to have 4 teams, you can maybe do 3 teams instead, so you have more players on one team. So if you've got 15 players, you could have 3 groups of 5, so then you'd have 10 players in possession and 5 players defending. So, but with 8 players, I've got 6 players in possession and 2 defenders trying to win the ball back. The reason we've got 4 different coloured bibs is so that increases the awareness of players. So we're going to be starting off with the 2 blues who are going to be defending. Once the blues win the ball back, so if the blues win the ball back from the yellows are defending. So then it's up to the other players, so the greens and the reds, to recognise which players are defending. So what we're trying to do is keep the ball for as long as we can. Lots of movements, lots of interchanging. When you lose the ball, can we transition quickly and keep the ball in those areas? So for the first part of the session, unlimited touches, or you can put 2 touch or 1 touch, wherever you want. What I had was the first 10 touches were unlimited. So, and then after 10 passes, it went to 2 touch. After 20 passes, it went to 1 touch, so that defenders had more chance of winning the ball back. Because if we kept it unlimited touches throughout, it might have been harder for them to win the ball back, as it is a 6v2 scenario in here. And if it was the same with the 10 versus 5, you could make the area a bit slightly bigger, but don't make it too big, because then the intensity will drop, the tempo will be low, and players will be taking too many touches because they've got that much time on the ball. So the coach will play in to one of the teams who are in possession. They will knock the ball about, constantly moving. The Blues will try and win the ball back, making it difficult. So the Blues are going to try and close down wherever the ball goes in one of the boxes. The players can move around freely. The boxes are for later on in the session when we move into one of the progressions. When the Blues win it back, they look to play out to one of the teams and then keep possession moving. So again, equipment for this part of the session, different coloured bibs. You can have a non-bib team if you've only got 3 colours of bibs. A bag of balls, so when the ball does go out, the coach can instantly play in. We're not having to run around after the footballs. And then you can have normal cones on the outside, but with the boxes in the middle being split down the line of the pitch, we want flat markers, because when the ball does get played across the box, which it will, if it's hitting cones, it will take the ball away and it might bounce up onto people's touch, whereas if it's a flat marker, it'll just roll straight over. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to part 2. So moving into this week's 4-corner model, starting off with technical and tactical. The main thing that we're looking at in the technical and tactical side is scanning our surroundings. So we want players, especially in the warm-up, to be looking around the shoulder to see what space they've got, to see if they've got a man on. And then moving into the main part of the session, because they're working in a small area of space, and with the progression that we're going to be bringing in, they've got to move quickly, they've got to change the zones, they've got to be scanning the area which is free. So when they've played a pass now, they're going to have to move to a different zone until they receive the ball again. So as soon as they pass it, or before they pass it, can they scan the shoulder, find out where the space is, and then they can communicate with the player who's in a different box to tell them to interchange and move. Reducing the touches, so we want them to receive the ball and play nice and quick. So this week's session will be focusing on how to play like Barcelona. So Barcelona move the ball quickly, even if it's short, simple passes. They keep the ball, they keep possession, and they wait for openings. So they don't play on 4 or 5 touches. It's 1 and 2 touch, moving the ball quickly, switching the play, even going backwards to go forwards, and being patient. Movements on and off the ball. So when we play the ball, we don't want the players standing still, we want them moving. So the rule that's going to be coming in part 2 is that once the players have passed the ball, they have to move to another box before they receive the ball again. So it's stopping them standing still. Even if they're only moving 5 yards away, they're creating space for somebody else to come into. And if they had a defender with them, they're drawing people out of position to create space for their teammates. Body position to receive the ball. So we don't want them, obviously we mentioned it a few times now about receiving the ball with a closed body. You can only go one way. So if you receive the ball and you're facing where it came from, you're only going to be able to go back that way. Whereas if you open your body out and you can receive on the back foot, you're opening loads of different possibilities. You can open out and switch to play, open out and dribble forward as well to go into space to then play a pass. So making sure that you're always telling the players to scan the surroundings so that they can open the body out, receive on the back foot, and then look to play out. And then the execution of the passes, having a good first touch needs to be followed by a good pass into feet. So test the player in their first touch and can take it forward. Whereas if we're just playing passes in too slowly, the player's got to then take an extra touch to get it away from the body. Whereas if it's fizzed in nice and fast, they've got to be more aware, more on the feet, on the toes. The speed of the play increases, and then there's more chance of being able to turn out quickly and play the ball forward. Moving into the psychological part of our 4-corner model, this is the most important part for me in this session because there's a lot of decision making. The players have got to be aware of their surroundings. There's got to be a lot of focus because there's a lot of transitions, and with the different coloured bibs going around, 1 minute the greens might be defending, then 10 seconds later it might be the reds, then it might be the blues. So the players have got to be focusing to see which team is actually trying to chase the ball and win it back, which teams they're playing possession with, and then when you move into the third progression, which team has passed the ball to you, so then you know that you can't play to that team in the next pass. So the players have got to be concentrating at all times, which is when we have the intensity levels high, it will make them tired. So then we want them to be able to start learning. They've got to start making decisions when they are tired. So when they've been playing in a game for 60, 70 minutes, when they're tired, they're still doing the basic things well. They're still concentrating. They're still making the right decisions, because it's all well and good being able to play for 20, 30 minutes. But then once you start to get tired and the energy levels can drop, we need to have that decision making all the time. So that when the players are chasing a game and they're 2-1 down, they're still playing the right passes that they've been working on in training. They're still focusing on the same philosophy, and they're not just hoofing the ball forward or making bad decisions in terms of, closing the body position, not playing out because they're tired. It's not an excuse. They've got to stay concentrated psychologically as well. Moving into the physical part of the four-corner model, the main thing we're looking at is stamina and endurance. So in the warm-up, they're going to be working for a minute each at a high intensity level. So obviously looking back into that psychological side, the decision making, but having that fitness and stamina levels to keep on working at that level. And then when you go into the main part, they might be defending for a minute because they're chasing after a 6v2 situation or a 10v5 situation. So then it's having that ability when you win the ball back to be able to keep it and stop themselves going back in the middle. Whereas if the players are tired and they just drop off instantly, then they will make bad decisions. So the intensity level is going to be high throughout, speed, endurance, so they're chasing after the ball, they're working, running into cones, getting back into the middle. So the more that they do it and the more they repeat it, when it goes into a match day, after 60, 70 minutes, they'll still be able to get them levels high. Moving into the social part of the four-corner model, a lot of communication has got to be given from players today, passing on information. So the basics of time and on, normal football language, but also because there's different colours with the bibs and teams defending, they've got to be giving people information in terms of who's defending, who's not defending. So if a green is just come out of transition, they need to be able to say, we can receive the ball now. And then if the reds go in, a player might not have seen it, so they've got to pass on information saying the reds are defending because the transition is going to be that quick. The players need to communicate with themselves as much as possible. The players and coaches offering lots of praise to each other. So when the players are keeping the ball for a long period of time, giving each other lots of praise because, it gives good feedback and it makes, obviously, the players feel good about what they're doing. And then same with the defenders, encouraging them to go and win the ball back quickly so that it gives them that motivation to work a little bit harder and win it back because they know that the reward is going to be that they're going to be keeping possession then. And that's their rest period as well. So moving into part 2 of the session, as previously mentioned in the four-corner model, when the player receives a ball, they then obviously release the ball. After they've released the ball, they can't receive it again until they've moved into a different box. So if the yellow then received it and played into the green, then we'd be looking for the blue player to try and interchange to create more space to run into. So then it makes it harder for the defenders because if the yellow was just standing still in there, it's easy for the reds to close down. Whereas if they've got to move, it might make the red defender move with them, and then there's more space for a blue player to come in. Same in here, create space in there as well. So after the players play the pass, they have to move to another box. If they don't move to another box and they receive it back in here, they then become a defender. So as well as losing the ball, if you don't move, that's another way you can go in and be a defending team now. So you've got to tell your teammate to, once he's received the ball, get out and move. So that's where the communication comes into the play now. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to part 3, which is the final part of this week's session. So moving into part 3, which is the final part of our session. The same progression from part 2 carries on, as well as the touches again. You might want to limit it down, so maybe the first 5 passes are unlimited, and then the next 10 passes are 2 touch, and then 1 touch. But with the progressions that we're bringing in now, it might be harder to make 10 and 20 passes, so leave the touches as they were. But then if the players do get to grips with it quite quickly, then you can change it and maybe just do the whole session on 2 touch, so that they have got to have that good first touch all the time. So the progression for this part is, the coach will play into any of the colours. The 2 yellows are the defenders. So same thing again, once this player in the blue has passed the ball, he has to move to another box. But also, if he passes to a green, the green player then can't play to a blue in their next pass. So the player that you've received from that colour, you have to then play to a different colour. So a green could then play to a green or to a red. So then if the green played to a red, the red then couldn't play to the green. So you've just got to be aware of where you're receiving the ball from and then where your next pass has got to be. So all those psychological parts of the four-corner model, the social part, the physical part as well, and the technical and tactical part are all coming through in this progression, because there's lots of decision making to be made. They've got to be aware of everything going around them. They've got to be lots of movements as well. The intensity level is going to be high, and they've got to focus on the touch and the execution of the passes. So again, with the transitions, if the yellows win it back, they can pass to anybody they want. But if a yellow plays straight into a red after winning it back from the greens, the reds have got to be switched on, knowing that they've received from the yellow, so they can't play into the yellows. They've got to know that the greens are defending and that they can only play to a red or a blue. So then it's got to trigger the other players to move quickly. So then if they do pass to a blue, that red's got to get out of there quickly. As long as they're getting out of there, it doesn't have to be really quickly, but as soon as they start moving, it creates space for somebody else to receive the ball. So at first, it might be quite confusing for the players. So take your time with the demo for this part of the session. Walk through it, maybe 3 or 4 different passes, and do a transition as well, so let the defenders win the ball back. And then when the players do make mistakes, it will happen the first 5 minutes of this part of the session. It will be a lot of confusion. The players will probably play a pass to somebody who they're not meant to, but once they get to grips with it, the session will work in real full flow. The pass will be moving quickly, the transitions will be good, and you'll see a lot of better decision making as the session goes on. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thank you for watching this week's session. For more content, follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.